Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we'll have a lot more people joining us after South Pitch wraps in just a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to say hello and welcome to the 34th New Orleans Film Festival. My name is Woody. Thank you. Welcome. My name is Woody. I'm the venue operations manager across the festival. I also coordinate our accessibility services, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce this panel today. Here in this venue, if you have any needs, you can talk to any of our staff. We'll help you. In the unlikely but totally possible case of emergency, just head toward an exit door and walk away from danger and toward the light. If there's anything else we can do for you, do just let us know. But at this time, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's panel, the managing director of the New Orleans Film Society, Monica Leska.
Thank you, Woody, and thank you everybody for coming. And I would like to start to thank Film Event Working Group for being a partner for this event, Sundance Institute and Full Spectrum Features. Thank you so much. This is really a pleasure to have you guys here and our filmmakers. But I also want to thank our programming team to including this panel in the conference of the festival. It's very important for us that this has happened and they made space for us. We're gonna go through a series of 3 questions, and we'll try to leave 10 minutes for the Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, we'll try to save 5 to 10 minutes at the end to cover them. But I wanted to start maybe with to say that our organization has been known, the New Orleans Film Society has been known to, I forgot to do image description, did I? So I want to add, I'm also a white female with black, recently dyed hair, in a purple dress and black glasses. And I guess that's it. Thank you. But I want to say why our organization, why New Orleans Film Society is doing this panel and why accessibility is important to us. And we have been known on national stage for being very inclusive film festival and organization that includes women and people of color, LGBTQ community, all marginalized communities, but we didn't want to limit our inclusion initiative to the disability community. So it was very important to us that that's also part of the work that we do, not only in the programming sector of the festival, but also it becomes a value for the organization. And it's widely thought about during every process of our event making, of program creation and design of the work and daily work of our organization. So it definitely has been a progress for us and became a value, and we're working towards making this happen. And we hope that that this panel will kind of introduce us to continuation of this work that we started. But we also did not have any data on the disability community. So what we have decided to do last year is to include disability question in all our surveys that go to different stakeholders for the festival. And we were able to ask people to self-identify if they're people with disabilities. And based on those surveys from last year and this year, we're able to say that about 7 to 10% of filmmakers, staff, and volunteers in industry self-identify as people with disabilities, which was a huge number for us because we were unaware, and it was really eye-opening to know that, and we have done zero effort around outreach to disability communities. So like, we already have this community here that we were not serving, and knowing that if we put any efforts into including outreach efforts to communities with disability, those numbers would even increase. But our starting point is like 10% of the hundreds of people that come to this festival already that self-identify. So it was kind of important metric that will help us kind of push as well our grant writing and funding for this initiative. So I wanted to kind of start with a question. I will introduce every panelist and ask our first question at the same time. I will start with Cassidy Beeman, who came here to us from Chicago, and she's the founder of Film Event Working Accessibility Group, FEW, and she also serves a role as a director of programs, events, and accessibility at Full Spectrum Features, where she oversees community-based programming, execution of film events, newly formed accessibility department that's championing access for both events and film production. She has also over 15 years of organizing and producing film festivals and different film events. So Cassidy, thank you for being here. Very honored to have you here at the festival. And can you tell us maybe and start us off and explain like why did you start at FEW and why the full spectrum feature puts so much importance on accessibility? And also, like, how do you define people with disabilities and who will benefit from all this work that we are trying to do here?
All of those things. Thank you, Monica. Before I start, I'm just going to offer a brief image description for our blind and low vision audiences who might be seeing this now or on recorded. So my name is Cassidy Diamond. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with short curly hair shaved on the sides. I'm wearing a golden white striped shirt and green flannel over it with black pants. And I'm really glad to be here, and I appreciate that question. You know, I identify as someone with hearing loss myself. I'm deaf in my left ear, and I never really realized how I adapted and made my environment adapt to be able to participate fully in things. And I never expected anyone to do that for me. But then I started realizing things like captions were available. There were things that were out there in the world that I use at home, like subtitles and captioning on my videos, that make things accessible to me. And I've worked with the disability community. As a child, my mom was a special education teacher. I was an in-home care worker for nearly 10 years with young adults with disabilities. And so it's always been something that's been in my life. And then as I worked in film festivals, you know, there's just a dearth of work that's happening in the film festival world around accessibility. And accessibility is important not just for audiences so that they can consume media and art just like anyone else, but film festivals are where filmmakers come to do their work. It's where they come to do their jobs. It's where they find opportunities. And if you're inaccessible, you're preventing people from doing their jobs. So to me, it was really important in our field in film festivals. We see a lot of programmers and festival directors having community with each other, sharing ideas and sharing insights. But I didn't see that happening on an operations level. And I was like, we need to support each other as we're doing this work. And so I founded FEW and identified about 10 organizations that were committed to doing this work and reached out and just basically, we just started meeting monthly. And it started as just supporting each other. And then over the past 2 years, we've started to build resources for our community, free, easy-to-use tools for other film festivals to produce accessible events. So the community was really important to me, and I think we've all found great community with each other and just being able to help each other, but also what we can do to help our community. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers is a lack of resources and education. And so I think that that's like where I wanted to start. It was like, there's so much to start, and I think people get freeze when they're like, there's so much to do around accessibility because we're so inaccessible. How do we do this? You just have to pick something and start somewhere. And so I ended up at Full Spectrum for a similar reason. As New Orleans Film Festival, we service BIPOC, women, non-binary, LGBTQ, and disabled filmmakers. We are doing a disservice to the people that we work with who have much higher intersections of disability than other communities. If we're not talking about accessibility, both in film production and making accessible sets, making sure that writers' rooms are accessible, making sure that we're creating everything that comes out of our production house with captions and audio description, but also that when they go to be seen, they can be seen accessibly as well. So I could go on, but I'll stop and let other folks speak.
Yeah, thank you, Cassidy. So our next guest is Laura Bench, who came here from Utah. And she's also part of the founding member group of FEW, and has been a full-time accessibility manager at the Sundance Institute since 2021. 2021. And before joining Sundance, Laura worked in accessibility for over 10 years, specializing in accommodating state services for individuals with dual sensory loss and supporting reformation of state systems in Utah around accessibility practices. Laura, tell us why Sundance Institute decided to, and when they decided to prioritize accessibility, and therefore hire a full-time accessibility manager, which is a very unique situation on a film festival scale, and I think it's the only festival that has full-time accessibility manager. So it was
on that scale, for sure. On that scale. For sure, yeah.
So it definitely was a huge decision, and I know that everybody's looking up at Sundance and what they do, so it's important that they kind of are leading in this area. But tell us about why Sundance is putting that much resources into accessibility, and who is the audience for the organization that and the Sundance Institute is trying to reach with the accessibility practices they have in place.
Sure, thank you. This is Laura speaking. I am a 5'2" white woman, and I'm wearing what I consider a black power suit. It's a jumpsuit, and I have short, shoulder-length blonde hair, which is blonde year-round, but naturally blonde in the summer only. I think it's answering your first question of why accessibility is important to Sundance is a pretty easy question. It very much aligns with our core values of inclusion, racial equity, and accessibility. Those come up in almost every conversation that happens internally at Sundance. You can look at our mission statement and see, we value people, and at the core of everything, people with disabilities are first and foremost people. And so everybody, it's a human right. Everybody deserves a spot at the table. Everybody deserves a chance to be a part of community. And I feel like at film festivals, that's what we're doing. We're celebrating community. We're learning from each other. We're creating great art. And everybody deserves the chance to do that. So the why is pretty easy. As far as prioritizing, I think there's honestly a few milestones, and honestly, all of it will probably come down to budget. I know Cassidy has an expression that I love of your mission statement is your budget. You can have a really nice mission statement, but once you start, implementing positions, implementing budget, that's when real change happens. And so I started my position as the first accessibility manager with Sundance Institute in 2021, gearing up for the 2022 festival. But before my time with Sundance, they had previously coordinator positions that were seasonal for quite a few years. And then in 2021, they wanted to grow that department to not just have a dedicated accessibility coordinator seasonally, but have an accessibility manager year-round that would provide services to the Institute and internal advice, as well as run and operate a team of both an accessibility, which has grown to be from a coordinator last year to now we'll have an associate manager, so we keep scaling up, and some vendor services as well. And so I would say really the last 5 years, Sundance has always tried to be mindful as a reactive approach as requests come in. They have done an excellent job over the years, but in the last 5 years, they've been proactive with the if we build it, they will come approach.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And we did not want this discussion about accessibility at work to happen with our very important partner in this initiative, which are independent filmmakers. And they're the content creators that we are showing. We are the middleman between audiences and filmmakers who make the content, and audience who consume the content. And we're in this middle way of trying to make sure that we're able to receive accessible contents and work with as a festival organizer to make it accessible of different accessibility forms. So it's really important to us that especially Southern and independent filmmakers we are working with also are on the same page with our value, and therefore we wanted to have you part of the discussion. So thank you, Tim and Andy, for being here. And we have here two co-directors of Mississippi River Styx, a film that's showing at the festival this year. Andy is an accomplished photographer, first-time director. His photographs have been published in national media like ESPN, GQ, Vanity Fair, Vice, and Time. And his work has been exhibited at Corcoran Gallery of Art and featured in Times Magazine, Lightbox, and CNN Belief blog. And Tim Grant is a director and producer, and his producing credits include documentary features like Out of Omaha, Finders Keepers, and J. Cole movies. Tim also directed short documentary The Aria of Babyface, Cauliflower Brown, which premiered internationally at Hot Docs and was selected by New York Times short series Up Dogs. So I also wanted to add that New Orleans Film Festival started requiring closed captions last year, and for all the films that are showing at the festival. And the requirement was mostly on paper. We didn't really have tools to require this closed caption, but the compliance of that requirement was about 30-40% of films that we received had closed caption. So when we were discussing this year, what could we do to increase this number? We have decided boldly, and thank you, Clint, for putting this in place, that we added another condition that could, I don't want to use word force, but maybe motivate filmmakers to provide those captions. And we decided New Orleans Film Festival gives exhibition fees to every filmmaker that's in the festival. So we said we're happy to provide this exhibition fee, but closed caption have to be part of the film you're sending. So I was able to get the numbers together this morning with my incredible tech team, and the number, the 30-40% from last year jumped to 70%. So we're very excited about this, and we also ensure that our tech team, which includes Lynn, Maureen, and Ted, and thank you to them for going through all those exhibition copies, but we also asked them that they review and QC the captions. They were able to kind of look into the captions filmmaker provided, and also work with filmmakers to adjust them if they were not full or not complete. So there was definitely a collaboration between filmmakers, and they were able to correct it if we had time to do it. So we were happy with that process. It's all happened, in the last 2 months, but we're very happy with the outcome of that. And I know this request usually from us comes at the very end of the filmmaking process. Like, you already have film that's ready, your budget is probably already filled, and there's no more funding to add the captions. So I know that it's probably hard for filmmakers to receive such a request at the such last-minute stage of your film production, but the filmmakers that we have invited today to a panel did a wonderful job with the closed caption, and we were very proud of their work, and wanted to kind of hear from them how did they go about and do that. So let's start, maybe if you can introduce yourself and explain why was it important for you to make your film accessible at our festival.
Yeah, thanks so much, Monica. This is Tim Grant speaking. I use he, him pronouns. Visual description is I am a white man. I have salt and pepper beard, kind of medium length hair, and I'm wearing a gray polo and some very old New Balances. I can't believe they lasted this long. So, yeah, the process of creating captions, we just did not realize how challenging that would be. And you're right, it came at the end of the process, which we've since learned is not the right way to do it. And I think that in the middle of just our struggles to create captions that would actually function, it dawned on us that we want everyone to be able to see and hear and read and consume our story without an interruption. We've worked quite hard on making this film, and so for anyone to have it interrupted, especially at very pivotal moments, which were actually the most challenging places for our captions to exist, would be heartbreaking to us. So that's when we really dug in, and wow, it was like a solid week of work to try to solve some of these problems. Now, we didn't really know what we were doing, to be honest. I mean, I've worked on films for a while. This is Andy's first as a director. But it usually just gets passed off. We're an independent film. We didn't have the money to do that. So we had to really take ownership of this part of the process. And, we didn't know that y'all existed. So that would have been nice. I mean, in the future, we'll be working with you, with you. But yeah, I think it came down to, there's that box on a lot of forums of like, who's your audience? And I've always been frustrated with that box because I say, everyone, I want everyone to see my movie. And so I feel like it applies here. I want everyone to be able to have the ability to understand the story. So yeah, I'll pass over the mic. We're sharing the mic, Andy and I are.
Do you want to answer the same question?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we can move on.
Can I
So,
just say one thing?
yes, please.
I mean, you all stumbled into the best practice of filmmakers creating captions and not handing it off to someone who doesn't know your film. So even though you feel like you might have done the process backwards, it's actually you stumbled into the right way of making captions. Like, you don't want to hand it off to someone else. So hopefully in the future you can have better tools to create it yourself and do it from the beginning. But as you can tell, your film was identified as having good captions because you put the time and effort into it. So also just bravo for not stopping when it was hard and just settling for something that was less than accurate and less than okay and saying, we don't want compliance, we want equity. And that's what we're always arguing for. It's not just compliance, don't do it because it's the law or because you have to, because a film festival is making you have to. Do it because you want your audience to have an equitable experiencing your film. So thank you for just caring about it and doing that. It means a lot. And you're setting a good role model for a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I think Cassidy mentioned during our conversation that we had before about this balance, like how captioning is an artistic expression as well, and it's an artistic part of the film creation as well. So I don't know if you want to add anything on that front.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So at Full Spectrum Features, we're also a production company, and we have gone ahead this year and created the role of a creative access producer. And so a creative access producer on our films means that we have someone at the beginning when the film is in development, as we're building the budget, that is there to work with the producers, the director, the editors, the cinematographer on making sure that the film is ready to have the best captions and the best audio description when it's delivered. So working with a DP on just thinking, you're gonna have captions at the bottom of this image, making sure that you're framing your image in a way that still translates everything you want visually, but leaves room for captioning. Thinking about getting a director to think about captioning from the beginning and how they're gonna wanna tell the story with words that they're also telling visually. And so we're working with the local disability community in Chicago. We have vendors with disabilities. Our new associate director of accessibility, Matt Lauterbach, is amazing. He's worked with Sundance. He's worked with many other folks. So really we want we're building it into our agreements with our filmmakers. So, like, this is a process. When you produce a movie, when you make a movie with us, you have to sign up for this. And you have to be willing to put that energy and the money. We'll put the money into it. We're going to give you the budget for it. But you have to be part of this process as a creative and look at it as a creative way to make stories. And captions make your film accessible not just to deaf and hard of hearing folks. My partner's a non-native English speaker. Captions benefit everything that she watches. So this accessibility tool of, like you so beautifully said, is you want everyone that experiences your film to get the full film. And that requires using creativity and the words that you choose and the language that you use in your captions. So thinking of it as an art form, and then audio description, it's just art. Like, audio description, when it's done well, is so beautiful, and it is so much better when a director has it, because in audio description, you only have so for folks that don't know, audio description is used for blind and low vision audiences, and you have a very small amount of time between your gaps of images or speaking of audio to be able to give visual information to your blind and low vision audiences. So if your editor and your DP and your director are thinking about it as they're editing, you can leave a little bit of room when it makes sense, but then a director only has, 3, 5, 10 seconds to get visual information across. And if you hand that off to someone else, they may identify something in the image that you as a director actually know. It's more important that they look at this thing in the back corner of the image, but somebody that's not involved in the film won't have that input. So that's what we're trying to do at Full Spectrum. And as a creative part, we're trying to get it that producer credit so that it has that level of being able to have impact across, and not a coordinator, not an associate level, but a producer level that can speak to all levels of the filmmaking crew to make sure that accessibility is being considered. And then working with the Illinois State Film Office to get creative access producer actually listed on the tax credit, so that people can get money back for this role and help fund this role in their productions.
Andy, did you want to add something?
Sure. So I'm Andy McMillan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm wearing tan pants, power crocs, dark gray shirt, and a blue button-up shirt. And I don't know what color the hat is. Light orange hat. Same colored hat. I would say, like, from our perspective, like, it's captions are a tool, right? It's communication. I feel like, especially on an independent film, we put so much on the line to communicate a story that we think is important. And every step of the way, you're fighting to gain any audience, right? It's so hard to get into any film festival, especially an incredible one like New Orleans or any of the others, that we've been lucky to screen at. And I think, like Tim and I literally risked our lives to make our movie. And the thought that at the very end we wouldn't be fully serving the audience just blows my mind. And so in this process of learning for one, how inept the sort of auto-generated captions are, like we had at a very pivotal moment in our movie, the main subject says, "I'm going to the den," which is a dive bar. And initially our caption said, "I'm going to the dentist." And it's like, that's a pretty important difference. So I think this whole process has been sort of revelatory for us, and also I think stumbling through to land somewhere that's hopefully acceptable has been nice to finally get here.
Thank you. So we are here all on different stages of our journey and represent different elements of the filmmaking ecosystem that includes film exhibitors like us, producers and film creators, and we all play an important role and must collaborate to make the whole community accessible and provide access to all audiences who are consumers of stories we show and tell. But we also face unique barriers to a specific sector or an area that we work with. And I want to talk a little bit more about like what are the unique barriers that you are facing to make the work more accessible. And just to start, New Orleans Film, just to mention a few barriers that I was able to identify as our organization has been working on this. As you all know, New Orleans is a very historical place and has a lot of historical buildings, but finding accessible venues in the city is very challenging. And New Orleans is wonderful, but also very hard to see actually law that exists, like ADA, being executed and implemented, and so working, limited resources is another obviously big problem, and with us not having enough resources to pay for venues who are accessible, and only venues that are accessible are mostly, venues that are coming from huge corporations or big hotels, and local small business owners or nonprofits don't really have funding as well to transition historical buildings to become venues. So definitely finding the venue that's accessible for communities with physical disabilities, it's definitely very hard and it's very challenging. Even our theaters, who are required by law to be accessible, they don't have the accessibility devices that we could use. We actually had to, at one of our theaters, hire a person to go and install them because they will just not do it. So like it's very hard, and we have to put our funding and resources from our own budget that we have to make sometimes those adjustments that don't come to us easy. And the other thing is also what we've talked about, the content, right? What we're trying to do with having the content, because if we don't receive a film that has, for example, closed caption, no matter what we do, we can't really show them to all audiences. So partnering with filmmakers is very important for us, and making sure that they are on board with what we're trying to do is something that we definitely will be growing and working on, to making sure that that part is done. So when we work on creating the festival and create venues and prepare films to exhibit are accessible. And not only our film screenings, but also our parties and other events that we have in the festival. So Laura, tell us maybe like how does it look for Sundance, and what barriers you're facing? Because I know you also don't have your own venue, and I'm sure we share similar struggles with the venue accessibility, I'm sure too.
Absolutely. This is Laura speaking, and for the interpreters who just came in the room, my sign name is LB, out in front of your shoulder. Absolutely. When you were describing your barriers, I was getting a little bit of PTSD and flashbacks, because it's really a very real challenge for a lot of cities like New Orleans. I know many of the venues that we've worked with in past years are historically exempt from the ADA and Park City. And the nature of the city itself, the entire city is on a mountain in the middle of winter with ice and snow. And so we're starting from ground zero with a lot of just inherent challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges of being a festival across the board is not having a lot of control, because you don't own anything. We are negotiating rights to screen somebody else's film. We're doing so in somebody else's theater. We're hosting somebody else's party in somebody else's venue. And so I think the biggest approach for Sundance has been two things. One, negotiation, partnering, conversation, just trying to figure out what can we do together to make this better. And I think it was very well said earlier of when you come in at the end of the process, everything is so much harder. So that leads to the other thing to address these barriers is policy. I'm a policy gal. I love policy. I think that no real change can happen without paperwork and policy to prove it, because the law will only get you so far. As we know, the ADA is baseline
starting point, and even then you can be exempt from that. That's not a good standard.
And there's no enforcement.
I'll enforce it. I'm coming.
Well, that's our policy someday, right?
And so, starting early on with policy, looking at not just what are we doing for us this festival, but also what's our 5-year strategic plan and how is accessibility incorporated and embedded in every single conversation we have, which is a very big, it's a big goal, it's a big challenge, and it's a big culture shift, but it makes all of the impact. And so Sundance, for example, in policy, for all Sundance hosted screenings and events, we only use 100% accessible venues. Not ADA approved, but 100% accessible. We do not build theaters or stages unless we are building those out to be accessible. And we also require all films to be closed caption, and newly this year we're requiring all films to also submit an open caption file. This gives us multiple screening options, the flexibility to support all audiences. And I'm just putting a plug out there for the directors who have a lot of control with the content we receive. Gear up, because eventually audio description requirements will be here too. If not by us, then by others. It's the way the world is going, but it's very challenging retroactively to try to convince other people to do something with their work, their art, their space, because of our mission. And so partnering with people to get the mission aligned from the very get-go, I think is the best approach.
Thank you. And Tim and Andy, you put a lot of effort. You said it was very important for you to create those closed caption. If you can tell us, like, what are the obstacles you face during that process, and that's something that, like, identifiable for independent filmmakers in the field. Like, what are the typical kind of barriers that you see as a producer and director with the films you're making?
Yeah, this is Tim speaking. Well, first of all, it requires a different set of software to create captions. We both have learned, and I don't really understand that. I mean, Adobe, if there's anyone working at Adobe, it would be great if it was a little easier to make captions within Adobe Premiere, which is, I think, the most used platform for editing, at least the level of independent film that we're making. So I think that's one thing, and that turned out to be one of the biggest barriers for us, because we had to understand a new software, we had to translate things. Part of the complication of our film, but there are a lot of other films that deal with the same thing, we have subtitles, but they're not subtitles for both characters in the scene. They're only subtitles for one character that you can't hear. So this creates a problem when it comes to caption, because captions have to exist on the bottom. SRTs will only go on the bottom. I don't know why that is also, but so it created a legibility issue where we either had to pull off our subtitles, and this gets really complicated, y'all, but just believe me, it's like something that breaks the film. These scenes are very important, and if you don't understand what is happening, you won't understand the film. So these technical things, they could be solved within the program that we're editing the film in, but not right now, not without some more support. So I think that would make it a little bit easier for us to create captions if we are required to do so. I'll pass the, you have, sure, yeah.
Sure. This is Andy. I think one of the other big challenges was just needing someone to tell us, this is what you do, this is how you check to make sure what you did was correct. So when we got asked to do this panel, now we have it. But when we got asked to do this panel, honestly, we were shocked, because we said a week, but it was like 2 or 3 weeks at this to try and make it right. I had screwed it up I don't know how many times, or like proofed all of our captions just to realize, like, well, there's actually a flaw in the original file and you have to do it again. And so just access to the information of, this is the best way to do it. This is how you can test to make sure it's correct. You know, like getting, like I believe New Orleans wanted us to have the characters per line, you know, 32 or something. And even figuring out if it's actually performing that way was really difficult. So it's really an access to information about the entire process, and again, being able to see what the end is supposed to be early on, so you know that you're doing things the right way and not just work that you're throwing away. So,
Do you mind if I jump in real quick? I mean, I mean, I think it's part of the work that we're all doing and that we understand is like, again, this is an ecosystem. Like, we all need to be on board, and if we're making it so hard for people, like, it's going to be even more barriers. And so, creating resources that exist in one place where people don't have to search all over the internet, that is a goal for Few and Full Spectrum, is to consolidate resources into one place for filmmakers, for exhibitors, for larger production companies to build that. One of my internal goals, which we kind of talked about beforehand, is standards. There are no, like, there's a lack of standards across the board. Again, like what New Orleans might require might be different than what Sundance requires. And it's like, if Sundance comes first, you're going to create things with their specs, and maybe, you know, Hot Springs has a different one. You don't have the time to create 15 different, you know, versions of your SRT or DTT file. And then if you get distribution, your Netflix, your Amazon, whatever, is going to have a different standard. And that happens a lot with audio description, which is a very labor-intensive, much more cost-intensive process. And a lot of filmmakers say, I'm just not going to do it for the festival run, because a lot of deals now that are happening with streamers, they require you to give that file. So Netflix isn't going to produce that audio description. They're going to make you go through their vendor and recreate it. And so we need to get these bigger streamers on board, because that means that people are missing their film festival audience. They're missing thousands of people that could see their film, that could build a following, that could help drive them to actually getting distribution, because the distributors are putting barriers and there's a lack of standards that says, hey, if we just create this once, it can be used 100 times, rather than it's going to be used a handful of times and then I'm going to have to do the same thing over again and do the whole process over again for something else. So I think standards, having standards and seeing if we can get people to the table, I mean, that's what we want to use our collective power for, is like, how do we get a major streamer in room along with funders, so that funders understand what the problem is, because lots of funders are out there offering money to film festivals. Like, I'm sure, I don't know where New Orleans funding comes from, but lots of people get federal dollars. Federal dollars mean that your festival has to be accessible because it's federal money. But again, no one's enforcing that. And I don't think these funders know the accessibility gaps that they're helping to fund and perpetuate. So it's like educating funders so we can open up more funds for filmmakers to produce accessible materials, for festivals to buy captioning devices, to be able to buy portable ramps for those places, like just provide funds for people. So it's like that knowledge and information of what we can, tools we can give filmmakers, tools we can give funders, and then tools that we can give exhibitors, so that we all can do this and we're not just putting financial burdens on each other for an inaccessible, ableist world that we are all now having to fix, right?
Industry-wide buy-in. Can I make a brief addition? I'm so sorry, this will be really quick. I just think I'm about to blow Tim's mind. So there are, for your information and future use, you can also do subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, which combines the language translation and embeds captioning of audio and sounds into the subtitles. So at Sundance this year, for our non-English films, we're requiring subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing versus just subtitles, so that you have both the language access as well as the audio access. Just a little tidbit there for you.
Thank you.
You two can offline about how that happens.
Do your research, people. Yeah, and kind of our last question here is about if we could talk a little bit about the strategies that have worked for us, or some positive things that came out of those accessibility work that we have done so far in your fields. And just from our perspective, I have to say that definitely hiring experts who are very well versed in accessibility events, like Woody, who was our introduced the panel. He is our venue operation manager, and he comes with this amazing experience with creating accessibility in venues and creating accessible events. So never question. We had a million events that we had before the festival. Like, he always would drop, like, is this accessible? Is this door accessible? And he would go and assess every venue we had and create description for the website. So like having somebody like that on our team, it was very crucial for us to understand, because not everybody on staff comes from the accessibility field, and 60 people that we hire really are not experts in that. So sometimes we like throw people in the deep water and like, we do accessibility, you have to make it accessible. I'm like, I don't know how. So having people who are those experts was really crucial for us, and it really worked. And we want to expand on that as well, and hire people from the disability community as well next year, and be able to kind of come to our events and assess what's working, what's not working, and how to make this work for everybody. And we have also included training for our staff and volunteers around not only what are the accessibility needs and what the disability means, and who are the people coming and how to serve them at our event. So doing that training for staff and volunteers was really eye-opening and created awareness for our staff when they come to venues and serve people. And also prioritizing accessibility, which I mentioned already, as an organization-wide value, and making sure that like every aspect of the organization understand that that's something that we are pursuing no matter what we do. And I also mentioned some data collection that we have done, and I think this would really position us well in creating very good narrative for grant writing, because we already have some collected data that we can work with, and we are also working with the checklist that few have created for film exhibitors and assessing our events. And we hope this will lead us to create like a long-term strategy too, and see what are the and I know there's a lot, what are the voids here that we have to fill, and how to make this happen. So I want to kind of
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
That you all should go to feaw.org. That's our website. You'll also see on there an accessibility scorecard that you all should fill out, and that will, for this festival, the feedback will go right back to Monica and her team, and so they can improve year over year. And this is another tool for data collection, for how accessibility is being received and the needs that you all in this community have, so that they can best serve their audience, right? Like, we can't assume we know what people need. We need to hear from the community. And this scorecard is a way that you can provide direct access back. And then we also have more data as a working group to take to funders and say, here's the gap. We're not just making this up. It's real. We need support. And so you all can do your part to help New Orleans and all other festivals by filling out that scorecard for this festival and any other festival you attend all year.
Cassidy, this is Laura speaking. Do you have to identify as a person with a disability to fill out that scorecard?
No, you do not.
Oh.
You all are learning about accessibility right now, so just be aware of your surroundings. You see there's a ramp to this stage. That's one of the questions, right? We have lovely ASL interpreters right now. We had hoped to have captioning. It fell through as things happen in events, but these are all things that you can mark off and say, this is what I saw, right? I saw that this was here. I saw that this wasn't here. All of that you do not have to identify as a person with disability to provide feedback and help this organization do better.
Yeah, and kind of funny situation with the ramp actually, when and it kind of shows you like where we are in New Orleans with accessibility. We ordered a stage and it never came with a ramp, and they don't even have a ramp, so we had to find a vendor to actually build it and paint this ramp here for us. So that's not something that comes easily, and things like this we really have to like adopt and create, because it's not something that like comes immediately to people's minds. But Lara, if you can tell us, maybe is there anything that Sundance Institute or festival implemented that would be useful to others and that worked for you and would be relevant to other players in the field? Yeah.
This is Laura speaking. Well, I've already mentioned budget and I've already mentioned policy. So that's already said and of course included and important. But I think at the very least, if you have no idea where to start and you have very few resources, partner. Partner, partner, partner. Your community is your friend. Your community is who you're serving. If you don't know what's accessible, go talk to the disability community, because they will tell you what's accessible. And they'll tell you, well, this works for me, but it might not work for somebody else. And I think the most valuable information and most valuable resource that you have on hand is other people. So partner with other organizations, with individuals, with the people you're serving, and make those partners diverse and many.
Thank you. And Cassidy, is there any successes you want to share from coming from the full spectrum features work that would be relevant to other producing organizations in the group?
Yes, but I know we're limited on time, and I really want to hear from Tiffany and me what you all have learned through this process as filmmakers, because I feel like I've talked a bunch. Y'all can come talk to me. We're doing the tax credit. We're doing things. We're trying to raise money. We got it. But I'm curious to take over and just see, like, we talked about the things that you learned out of this process. So, like, what would you do differently on the next film that you make? Or success. Yeah, like, what did you learn from this to, like, improve your next film?
Sure, this is Andy. The biggest thing that I feel like I learned is to start early. To have the outcome in mind as early as possible, and to not be, we've kind of covered this, but to not just be scrambling to force something to work that's not going to work. And I think now that we're aware of the Elves organization, hopefully have some better ideas for what's expected and what's useful and helpful early on in the process.
This is Tim. I wish I had attended this panel like 2 years ago. That's what I'm learning.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, if audience have any questions, we have some time left. Please go ahead. Yeah.
This is Julia. I love hearing about the accessibility for film festivals and exhibitors, but I wonder if you worked on this, and I'd love to hear from you guys too about accessibility on film sets and like hiring people with disabilities on sets, even the application process, because it's not, usually accessible, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Thank you.
This is Tim speaking. I'm probably not the best to answer this, just because our film is very small, documentary, and you're seeing 2/3 of our crew on stage.
It's really accessible for us.
Yes, exactly. Our film is about a man going down the Mississippi River in a houseboat that is sinking, and so it was difficult for us to get onto the boat. So but we didn't have any hires in this case. It was a very core group, and sometimes it was just Andy and I on our film. So and we make documentaries, so I can't speak to narrative, more scripted films.
Your next film. Yeah.
There you go.
I can jump in a little bit because all films should be accessible behind the camera too, and there's just as many barriers to making that happen. We could do a whole other panel on that. But what is really awesome is there is the role of a production access coordinator that is gaining traction right now. I don't know if you all know of intimacy coordinators. That's like another thing. It's like in that same conversation as accessibility and safety on your sets. It's another thing that Full Spectrum is advocating to get on the Illinois tax credit again, so that people can be more aware of it, so that they can be getting funding for it. And a lot of production access coordinators, I would recommend you lean into those with lived experience with disability.
100%.
And there are a lot of folks with disabilities that are production access coordinators that not only are educated on their own disability and their own lived experience, they're educated on others and have networks of other people that they can bring in for any other kind of event. We worked with someone who was used to building a deaf writer, a writer's room for someone that used sign language in the writer's room. Worked with Marvel to create an accessible writer's room. So thinking there are people out there, and again, it's community and the disability community, and the more that we hire people with disabilities to be part of productions at the producer level, all the way down to PA level, it's going to increase the accessibility of your film. So even if you don't have the money to hire people at all different kind of levels, just make sure you're able to support someone and listen to them. Ask them what accommodations they need that will make this experience more accessible, and provide what you can, and start there if you're a small, 3 or 4 person team. You can start there.
Thank you. And we have another question.
Thank you. As a deaf person, I wanted to make a comment that I really appreciate you guys having captions on your videos. Part of my question is how to push for more films to have captions, because really it should be 100%, how to push even more. Thank you. The second part of my question is how do we make the disabled community feel invited? Like here in New Orleans, this film festival, it has captions, but a lot of people don't know that, so they don't come. And so that's my 2-part question for you guys. I just want to know what you guys think.
Thank you so much for that. And I can speak a little bit on the
Just in general.
on the inclusion of the community. Yeah, we're actually writing a grant right now to do focus group with the disability community and invite different people with disabilities in the spring to our events and have them see what those events look like and assess what are their needs, their specific their disability, and that's something that we're trying to put in our strategy plan and then increase efforts to invite the community at our events. So that's something we are taking next year.
If this is Laura speaking, if I might respond to that as well. I think putting a lot of time and attention and effort into the space you're creating is going to build not just an accessible. I think when people think of accessibility, often they think accommodations, they think operations, and they think compliance, all of which are included. But a feeling of safety, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of I can walk into the space and be myself is something that is going to deter audiences if that's not built in. And so a lot of organizations are doing really great equity work across the board with inclusion. Don't forget about the disability community. Again, your policy, your budget, your partnerships, these are things that will drive an atmosphere. And I really love the San Francisco Film Festival. Is that who was doing it? There was we had just sat in a meeting where they were promoting the idea of not using data to drive the work you're doing. And I know that that's a backwards idea for a lot of the work we do. We need data to prove that it's viable and that it's necessary. But if you're in an inaccessible space and you're using the number of people who come to your space as justification to become accessible, you're always behind, you're always retroactive, you're always catching up, and it's always last minute. So putting the effort out there, if we build it, they will come, and believe you me, they will come. The disability community will support you for your efforts. So get on after it.
This is Cassidy, and they will bring their friends, right? So I think that's one thing that we at Full Spectrum have realized in working with the film festivals in the Chicago community that we want to pursue is there's a lot of distrust and lack of safety between organizations in the disability community. It's one thing when you say there's going to be captions and then someone shows up and they're not there. Or this venue is accessible and lo and behold the building's accessible but the theater isn't. the stage isn't, so someone with a wheelchair takes the effort to leave their house, show up at your space, and then it's inaccessible. That's building a lot of distrust. So like building any new audience, just like it is building, outreach to your Spanish-speaking audiences, whatever that is, it's going to take time. And so we don't want people to get deterred, like you said, when they build things and people don't show up right away, right? You have to reach out to disability organizations in your community. We encourage folks to do some things year-round that are specifically focused on the disability community. So maybe you're working with a deaf school in your area, you can have a Saturday afternoon screening where you know you're going to have car captioning for the intro and the Q&A, and you're going to have a captioned movie, and you're going to have ASL interpreters, and you do that outreach and you show people, oh, when you do show up, we are actually following through on what we're saying we're providing, so you can trust us. You can trust that what we say we mean, and that we will be here for you, and that this is an environment that you're welcome in. So it takes time to build that trust with any new community. Disability community isn't any different. So put that effort in year-round, not just at your festival.
I have one quick thing to add, if I may. This is Tim speaking. Just from a filmmaker perspective, again, this is kind of our first experience with creating captions on our own. And I just wanted to say thanks for pushing us and encouraging us to do it, because now that we've done it, we know how important it is. And I think that if you are able to get across to filmmakers that this is an important thing to do to capture a new audience in a lot of cases for filmmakers, then they're going to be on board, because they want all people to see their movie. So
we need to get this recorded and send it to everybody, because I can't tell you how many people in leadership will say, well, we can't impact the creative vision of the filmmakers by forcing them to do captions. We can't put them over captions over their image, because that's going to take away. And to hear filmmakers say, oh no, this actually helps me with my audience. Like, people make these decisions and assumptions about what filmmakers want because they're not providing captions, when one of the reasons maybe they just didn't understand why it was important and how to do it. Not because they thought it was going to ruin the image on the screen or detract from something that they were making, but it's something you hear all the time from people. So we need to take you guys on the road. We're going to go across the U.S. and talk to EDs and festival directors about why filmmakers want more people to see their films.
Well, that line of thinking I find actually quite offensive, because we're making movies for all. And what they're suggesting is that our moving images are only for some, and I can't accept that.
Thank you so much. We unfortunately have to finish this conversation, but it was so amazing to have you here and being part of it and having discussion. And thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but panels are available after to answer those questions if you had and wanted to ask. We will be around here. And thank you so much for coming.
And thank you to our ASL interpreters.